Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast, a website about reimagining your life. Thanks for joining me today to talk about manifestation versus envisionment. So let's get started. If you like what you hear today, please leave a like, tell your friends, send me a message. So this week includes some unexpected travel. So I'm doing a live a day early, which is a surprise to everyone. I apologize for no notice, including to my staff. And because it was such a surprise, it may take a little longer to get actually hit the syndication streams. So if you're watching live, you may see it a day before other people. And it'll also take a little while to get the transcript completed. All that's totally my fault because this is a real spur of the moment thing because of some travel that came up. So I apologize again. Sometimes life has to be a little fluid and things work out. So based upon some readings and questions, I decided to look briefly into how manifestation, which has kind of again become quite popular, compares to life envisionment, which is how we approach reimagining your life. So I've been exposed to manifestation by some of my mentors, both in conjunction with or as a separate approach to life envisionment. I did a little research over the past few weeks and wanted to give you kind of my initial impressions of how the two compare. Equally important, are they mutually exclusive of each other? Are they complementary? Or are there two parallel approaches to moving your life forward? My very initial reaction was, is it manifestation or is this kind of effective planning and envisionment? I mean, there's a lot of things where they kind of overlap, but then there's some real differences. So I was actually focusing on this particular book, which was recommended to me, Dollars Flow to Me Easily by Richard Dotz. You can see it's very, very little book, thin little book. It's only 85 pages, and then there's like another 20 pages about the author and things like that. But even despite the small size, it's not really a quick read. There are a lot of subtle ideas to think about, and I've spent sometimes 2 or 3 nights reading back through a page and thinking about it and then going back and looking at some of the earlier thoughts and see how they all tie together. It's an interesting book from that way. But one big emphasis is on clearing your mind instead of focusing on the problem and then just letting the decision come to you rather than trying to reason it out. And Richard Dotz hits that many, many times in a lot of different ways. And he also emphasizes that you first have to know what you really want. And you should have your desires well defined, or else you'll never know if you've attained them. And that should sound familiar because we talk about the same thing with envisionment. The overall logic of clearing your mind is that by trying to solve a problem and focusing on it, and well, this particular book, he has a number of books in the series. This particular book is all about money. So his argument is that instead of saying, money's a problem, I don't have enough money, how am I going to pay my bills, not enough money, and you're always focusing on that one thing, trying to solve it, what you're doing is focusing on the negative emotions of it. And inadvertently, it kind of turns into essentially negative self-talk. And we've talked about how damaging that is. And, as we and many others have said, you'll tend to go in your life where you're actually focusing your attention. So if you focus on, say, money problems, well, then you're going to create for yourself more money problems, which isn't what we wanted to do at all. We were trying to solve those things. So instead, part of his approach, and I presume pretty much a general approach from what I've heard in envisionment, is you don't ask for a particular outcome. You just live and feel like that outcome is kind of inevitable. And you really emphasize on the feeling part of it. And we'll talk about that again in a second. So is manifestation really woo-woo, right? Or is it just kind of the same common sense steps that we're taking? Often it's presented in a woo-woo fashion. And I think it's kind of a mixture of common sense techniques like we often speak about, but it's also mixed with a really healthy dose of allowing yourself to truly open your mind to powers beyond yourself. So is that really woo? Not really. On my way of thinking, it's just kind of admitting that the universe is a really big place. There's lots of things. There's lots of knowledge going around. It's already, I can't think of the name now. There's an effect that the scientists finally had to admit really happened, where if two people are talking about each other, they've measured this, and they're talking about something that's really very involving for the one, and the other person is getting involved too, whether it's an emotional situation or whatever, that their brains will actually synchronize. Their brain waves actually synchronize, and very quickly over a course of, I think sometimes less than a minute or two. And they'll see that the one comes into synchronization with the other, and they truly, they are feeling each other. And so when we talk about things in the universe affecting us, that's really not such a silly thought, to my way of thinking. There's a lot of ways to look at the universe, and a lot of ways to look at how we as a peoples all interact together. And so you could argue pretty effectively that, opening your mind and just putting out in your own mind that kind of like, I have this issue, I need some help, that chances are some passing people will hang on to that and go, oh yeah, well, here's how I approach it, here's that I approached it, and that you will actually start to get input from other places. So that's the basis of what I have been able to tell. One of the big bases of envisioning, of manifesting things, is that you're just letting the universe flow into you, and that you already have the answer inside you, and the universe will just kind of help pull it out and make it clear to you. So that was all about manifestation. Now on to envisionment. As we approach it, envisionment is picturing your ideal situation, your ideal life, getting buy-in from your brain, and then living a life focused on that dream, that ideal situation, according to your plan. And it starts by identifying your core principles, same as how Richard Dotz recommends starting out. Then you envision your ideal life in every single way, in every minute detail, using all your senses, everything, the sounds you hear, the smells you smell, everything, what your success feels like. And, make it a vision board or drawing, do animations, whatever it is that gets you to move ahead onto that total immersion in what you think would be your true vision of a happy life. Well, in reality, this is actually pretty similar to manifestation, as described in Mr. Dotz. He emphasizes the need to feel, even if you can't describe the feeling in words, but to feel how reaching your inner self in unison with the universe would feel to you. And, once you have your vision, we recommend working back to the present, remembering how you solved your problems when you came up. Well, on the manifestation approach, it's more, once you actually feel that and you let it settle into you, then the solutions will become clear. And so we're kind of having different words describing the same sort of situation when you think about it. But in our technique, right, we then determine the long and short-term goals that lead towards your life vision, focus on seeing your vision and working towards your goals. And then remembering, by doing that and working backwards from that, most problems are solvable. And so envisionment and manifestation seem to diverge here, because as Dotz presents it, there's no benefit and much potential harm from trying to plan your way to success based upon the, going to a solution and trying to plan your way there. And he feels that just taking the feelings in the universe will guide you better if you have an open mind. However, I feel there's some semantics going on here, because one of our reasons for starting with the vision and getting buy-in from your brain is so that your brain can then go off on its own to find a solution. And I'd suggest that this is really allowing your brain to tap into both its own previous knowledge and the knowledge that exists all around us. So perhaps the big apparent difference isn't quite as large as it first appears. So comparing manifestation and envisionment, we see that in many respects, there are just two ways to look at the same process. Both emphasize that you have the answer within you and that you should focus on the vision rather than focusing on the problems. Both also emphasize that we should be in unity with ourselves and consistent in our own beliefs. Manifestation emphasizes waiting to find the answers, or that they will just appear from the universe in general if we open our minds to them. Envisionment emphasizes that we give our minds the freedom to see the vision it already has in itself, and then let it work back to the present to help guide our goals. But both actually follow very similar paths, and it's really very different presentations. It's really the biggest difference between them. In the the actions that we're taking in both methods, they're actually very similar in most respects. Envisionment and goal setting are more proactive, but the focus on open-mindedness in manifestation is relevant in terms of allowing your mind to work without presumptions. So that's kind of it on the very short overview. I hope you found it, even though it's very brief, very limited, I hope you found it somewhat useful and interesting to compare manifestation and envisionment. And because, as I said, in reality, both of them have more in common, I think, than they do in difference. And as I've been involved with manifestation through some of my mentors, and I was always struck by how the concepts didn't really seem that far into each other when they were brought back to the basics. And I think that's one of the things is when you get away from the fluff, for lack of a better term, that people tend to put on these things, they really tend to come back to very similar roots. And now that we looked at it a little closer, we can see that much of it is more in the approach and which technique you're more comfortable with. Because whatever you're more comfortable with, that's the one that's probably going to be more effective for you and your own belief system. So that's it for the evening. I hope you can see how envisionment and manifestation share many common traits and have similar outcomes, but with a different emphasis. And it's not, neither one is right or wrong. It's really what works best for you. So your homework, always optional, is to think about your vision and whether you feel more comfortable just holding the feeling of your vision and see if that kind of brings you along to where you want to be, or actively thinking about ways to put yourself into situations likely to lead you to a particular outcome. Extra points if you spend a few days trying both approaches to solve a short-term challenge. Now, I know a few days is not very long at all. It's a very short time. But I would expect both techniques should be able to give you some sense what the next opportunity may bring. So that's it for the evening. As always, ukr7.com, which is our list of links. And I found some more to update, and I apologize. I got to get that up there. There's one broken link on there I found. But a lot of links to ways to support Ukraine, and also World Central Kitchen, wck.org, where they work around the world, always in humanitarian crisis situations, and they emphasize getting food into people from local sources. Local only because usually when there's real disaster, it's hard to get things in and out of an area. So if you have things around, that's what they try and maximize the use of, so that people start getting fed immediately, because that's really pretty high up on the list of things. Right after water, food comes pretty close after that. So again, ukr7.com, wck.org. And remember, one of the best ways to care for yourself is to care for others. When you think outside yourself, it really helps you see the world in a different perspective, and helps, I think, give you a much more balanced view of the world in general. So if you can and you're able, please check it out, and in some way help somebody, if not through one of the formal organizations, just by meeting them on the street and making their life a little better. As always, thank you for stopping by. If you found something interesting or useful, please pass it along, and please hit that like button. If not, please drop me a comment as to what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everyone. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you.